the time to join this conversation, to kick off our discussion around insecticide resistance. But before I turn things over to Jacob, allow me to just share with you a very quick update on GBCHealth and our malaria portfolio across the organization. So for some of you might know this, but for those who don't, GBC's malaria portfolio is our largest single disease portfolio in the organization, and it covers three activities or initiative areas. The first is the Global Fund's private sector delegation to the Global Fund's board, and there with focus on AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. We work closely with the PSD and their leadership there, just ensuring that we're getting up-to-date messages and information on key decisions taking place at the Global Fund board. Also, the Private Sector Members Council to the Rollback Malaria Partnership. Some of you are intimately aware of the changes underway within the Rollback Malaria Partnership, and there will be in a very short time we'll be having more announcements around the new malaria partnership moving forward. But within this sector, GBCHealth also coordinates the private sector group of this partnership, and that group is called the Private Sector Members Council. And then, of course, the Corporate Alliance on Malaria in Africa. And today's discussion is being co-hosted by the Corporate Alliance on Malaria in Africa. This is an initiative that was developed by Chevron and Marathon and Bayer and a few other companies in 2006, and it's currently co-chaired by Chevron with support in the form of our technical advisor, Jacob Williams. And so I just wanted to lay this out for you because across these three private sector groupings, we've had multiple discussions in the last year. In particular, actually, it's been ongoing for several years, but quite a bit of this has heightened in the last year, particularly as we got to this push towards the end of the Millennium Development Goals and sort of the redevelopment, if you will, of new malaria targets for the next 15 years. And in these discussions, we've identified a couple of priority areas, and time again, the issue of insecticide and drug resistance keeps popping up. And across the board, the discussion around insecticide resistance elevated as one of priority. And so within the context of these three delegations or private sector constituencies that are housed within GBCHealth, we decided that maybe we need to really spend some time focusing on this and figuring out what value add we could bring to the table to support ongoing discussions and activities that have already been taking place in this regard. So within that context, in 2016, we've highlighted the issue of insecticide resistance as a top priority, particularly within the Corporate Alliance on Malaria in Africa, but of course, supported through discussions with our colleagues within the other private sector delegations. And that's sort of what brings us to today's discussion. I also want to pause and just say that CAMA will be celebrating, or is celebrating, 10 years this year. And for the folks on the phone, I believe the Chevron team is on the phone, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Nesto is also dialed in. I also just want to pause and acknowledge their leadership in sticking it out with CAMA, in truly providing guidance to CAMA, and being an ambassador and an advocate for the Alliance over the last 10 years. And I also want to just acknowledge Jacob and his commitment to sort of the technicality of the work that we have done in the last 8 years serving as our technical advisor. And we're delighted to have him speaking this morning. For some of you, you know Jacob very well, perhaps much longer than I do. But for those of you who don't know, Jacob serves as the co-chair of the Vector Control Working Group. It's a group of over 500, it's a network of over 500 stakeholders, even more, across malaria endemic regions and across various sectors. Many participants are from the private sector. GBCHealth is an active member of the Vector Control Working Group. And in his capacity as our technical advisor, Jacob would be leading our discussion this morning. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jacob to lead us. And if you aren't able to access the PowerPoint, we will be very sure to make sure we're speaking with clarity and good understanding so that you are getting a full grasp of the content. And we will share the deck as part of the follow-up from this call. And so with that, I'll just turn things over to Jacob. Jacob, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Sancia. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Yes, if we could have the presentation. Do I show it from here, or Maggie will be doing that?
Maggie will be running us through Jacob, so just let us. We're on the opening slide.
All right. Okay. So the title is Insecticide Resistance and Action for Effective Malaria Control. It's just to highlight where we are in terms of insecticide resistance and what opportunities exist for our coalition to support in making sure that we all have a handle on effective management. So I'll just be going through this. As for some of you, it might be a repetition, but with others, I mean, we'll try as much as possible. Once the question time comes up, comments, we can clarify any point that needs to be. We all know insecticide resistance is here to stay. It's a reality, right? And that for the major gains that have occurred in the last 15 years, insecticide resistance actually threatens to undermine these gains. In fact, if you recall that the last year, 2014, Vector Control Working Group meeting, the opening statement by the director of the Global Malaria Program said from his perspective, insecticide resistance is the primary threat to malaria control agenda. Insecticide, as you know, is the core basis for most of our vector control intervention. They are either insecticide itself, insecticide based, or insecticide moderate. So you have our primary tools like the long-lasting nets, the IRS, and even the larvicide. You have insecticide playing roles in there. Right now it's about 61 countries have reported to WHO the presence of resistance in their country, and these are countries with high malaria transmission. Of these, 49 of these countries report resistance to one or more of the 4 classes of insecticides. And not only that, for some of these countries, they have resistance in all the 4 classes of insecticides. We also all know that the actual extent of the resistance is underreported, because even for countries that are reporting the resistance, we know that monitoring is not happening throughout the country. Sometimes the monitoring are ad hoc, monitoring activities are ad hoc, it's not very routine. and there are issues of the quality of the reporting as well. So in both geographical context and in terms of the density of the problem, there is underreporting. And so you see that if those who can see, you see that there is a graph or a figure that WHO present in the World Malaria Report that shows the spread, particularly for Sub-Saharan Africa and parts of the Indian subcontinent. It's a major problem. And what has been the challenging landscape for innovation and investment? We all know that for the current product development landscape, it does not really favor innovation and increased investment. I mean, if you look at the history, the last insecticide active ingredient that was brought to market was well over 35 years ago. And we know also that there is a very lengthy process to develop and bring product to market, from the testing through the validation through recommendation. It's been estimated that it could take up to 10 years from the discovery to first commercialization. That's a lot of time. So there has been over time a lot of us talking in various fora, and currently there are ongoing action sort of improve review of the WHOPES, WHO pesticide evaluation scheme, which is part of a broader overarching innovation to impact initiative, the so-called I2I. And the whole idea is to try to quicken the process and make sure that some of the concerns that we all have are addressed. WHOPES has served a very vital role and will continue to. So we are hoping that the processes that will come out will be will address the concerns that we've raised. Then also there is the increased public-private partnerships, such as the Innovative Vector Control Consortium that is being funded originally by the Gates Foundation, and that has spurred some level of innovation between manufacturers, the academia, and research institutions. So if you see the next slide, you see that there is a slide from IVCC showing the pipeline, the current pipeline of products that are coming through, from data mining processes going through all the way to local registration, and it ranges from the period 2009 to 2020-25, which says there are about three lead compounds in pre-development, 3 candidates for pre-development has been selected. There are 4 backup compounds and 2 follow-up classes. So there is some action, and some of them are facing going through the WHOPES recommendation at the moment. Next slide will show that there are still critical bottlenecks, although you see these activities are at the global level, trying to address the bottlenecks for research and development and recommendations and validations. But downstream, we also know that there are severe bottlenecks within the countries, and that also either add to cost or make it very unfriendly in terms of the manufacturers, in terms of the programs having quick access, timely access to new products and things like that. So we have every country at the moment having their own registration procedures and guidelines, even countries next door for which the ecological and eco-epidemiological parameters are very similar. You will still have to, the manufacturer will still have to go in there, conduct the test, go through the evaluation processes before registration is done. It makes it onerous, it makes it very expensive. There is also the problem of inadequate forecasting capacities in most of the countries, where you could not, forecast ahead how much you will need, and therefore that makes the procurement procedure a little inefficient. It leads to program delays, it adds to cost, it also puts undue pressure on the manufacturers because they also have to know what kind of forecasting so that they can ramp up their production to meet the demand. Then you have the low limited capacity in countries to adopt new insecticides whenever they come. They will have to learn how to use it, learn all the safe handling issues and field application methods and how to report and all that. So that also, we anticipate that will also be a bottleneck that needs to be looked at. And therefore, we're saying, with all this in mind, what is the response? What is the role of the private sector in advocating for an improved landscape? So far, we've done a good work of trying to bring up some of the frustrations at a global level, but then there are all these other places that we can. So the next few minutes, I'm going to look at the kind of opportunities we have, what potential activities we can engage in to support the process, and what possible outcomes will come out of that. So for the downstream, some of the things that we believe we could support ongoing efforts are to improve communication and engagement with the national authorities and decision makers, in addressing all these problems that we've mentioned. Sometimes it's bringing all these up to the highest level, making them aware that, change could be good, and change could reduce costs, change could cut down time, lead time, and all that. So we can improve the market assurance, also work towards market assurance or guarantee of markets. This potentially by engaging the global community, the funding agencies, even the regional entities and regional market groupings, to sort of guarantee market that help to promote and reward innovation and investment in new product development. Another area that we think we could support ongoing efforts would be to harmonize the harmonization of country registration processes. And this we have raised, many of us have raised it in different fora, that the economic groupings like ECOWAS, like SADC and others can form the basis for a harmonized registration procedure so that all the countries buy into it. If a new product comes in and it satisfies those criteria and is accepted, and the registration is automatically across the countries. This will reduce the expenditure and the lead time. And then another area will be also to support WHO in the development of specification packages on the new products to accelerate country registration processes. Again, with the response, the areas of opportunity for the private sector actions that we think we could engage in based on discussions over the last 8 months. So one of the areas that I think we could work on to improve the country capacity for quality assurance and pesticide management. In that area, we could work with countries to eliminate the trade of substandard, mislabeled, and counterfeit pesticides. Most of the manufacturers have agents in the regions or in the countries that are well situated that we could support to help the country build the capacity to track and remove mislabeled and substandard counterfeit pesticides. We could also work to enhance the capacities of countries for safe handling of the pesticides, the end use and disposal, environmentally sound disposal of the waste. Some of these we do already, but if we are thinking of, accelerating adoption, accelerating widespread use of new insecticides, then we must begin to take actions that enhance country competencies in that area. We could also support with specific targeted training and surveillance workshops aimed to improve countries' capacity for data collection, reporting, and management of insecticide resistance. I recall that I think it was 2009, 2010, we had the first such training in Angola, which most of the CAMA companies and even GBCHealth companies, supported, and it was very, very successful. Very high level advocacy and publicity for everybody, and even PMI, also put it up as a flagship for the kind of PPPs they can do with the private sector to enhance, these competencies. We also supported such similar training in DRC Congo a couple of years back, maybe I think 2012. Now, the other area that we can also work will be to support WHO efforts to establish the mechanisms that capture data and report on procedures to enable countries provide feedback on these new insecticides as and when they come in, even for the existing ones. It's funny, but every time WHO has to come up with estimating how much of insecticides are being used by countries, then they have to scramble, go to PMI, go to countries, beg. Some time back I was myself and Morteza who begged the countries, give us data, in order to try and pull things together. And so even for the existing insecticide products, there is some data, gaps in the information we have on utilization rate of the insecticides. Then if we help, not only will it prospectively help the new insecticides that come out, but it will provide early feedback to the manufacturers ourselves for us to also then react, timely to any unforeseen field, challenges that may come up. Again, so if those are the four, or let's say the three main ideas: improving country capacity or supporting the improvement of country capacity for quality assurance and pesticide management. We're talking of the conducting targeted training, and then supporting WHO efforts with data capture. And what I had proposed at the ASTMH meeting that we had, the side meeting, was if we could select a couple of countries that we could all come together and support to develop these capacities. It becomes a flagship that then we can use to tell the funders, like Global Fund and the others, that in addition to providing funds to buy the nets and buy the insecticides and do the IRS and all that, if you invest in these other things, then overall the performance is better. So we will need to be proactively demonstrating some of these, because it will be the best advocacy we can have. Now, what are some of the outcomes, potential outcomes and improvement based on these ideas? We think that it will lead to reduced disease burden and cost effectiveness of interventions, because countries will have the capacity to manage their resistance better, will be able to have timely, feedback on what insecticides to use and what changes will happen. It makes it more cost effective. There will be productivity gains for the workplace. I know that my friends from AngloGold are on the call. I mean, they have one of the primary examples you can ever come across. Productivity gains in the workplace due to improved health of employees, their families, their communities. The reduction of lost work days due to ill health. That's very huge. Then also for the manufacturers, there's a financial benefit due to reliable forecasting, improved prospects for procurement, and return on investment. There will also, we think, will be an increased efficiency to the overall country systems and therefore a better use of funds for public health. And that will be relevant to the funders. So again, the countries will benefit, the targeted populations will benefit, the private sector in the countries will benefit, the manufacturers and other producers will benefit, and then also the funders themselves will benefit. So our call to action today and going forward will be for all of us to work together to support the creation of an improved landscape for innovation and return on investment through sustainable markets that will enable effective country management of insecticide resistance. So that is what I wanted to lead our follow-up discussions on, and I will now hand it back over to the organizers so that we can open it for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. That was very clear and absolutely builds on quite a bit of work that GBCHealth across this broad malaria portfolio and with the leadership of CAMA in particular, we have done over the last couple of years, and Jacob has mentioned a couple of these capacity building activities that we've conducted in Angola. The interesting thing on that is, one of the outcomes of that project was that we were able to support the fundraising with support from USAID PMI, and within a year or two later, the Angolan government opened its first insectary. And so that's the type of sort of long-term sustainable plan that we're looking for, where countries, where we can support countries, because as we're going into this process of the Sustainable Development Goals, the rhetoric now is country ownership, country accountability, country leadership, and that's all well and good. But if countries are ill-equipped to be able to do that, then it's sort of a joint responsibility, a joint partnership across our stakeholder community to support that process, even as we push global leaders to focus on better policies, increased financing, etc. So with that, I'm going to ask Maggie to open the lines for questions. We've received a couple comments already over email from folks, so we're hoping that for those of you who have questions, you'll be able to ask them now. Please state your name and the organization that you're representing when asking your questions. So I'd like to open up for questions. Are there any questions on the line?
Or comments.
Did I hear someone? Hello?
No, I said all comments.
Okay.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes, that sounds like Manuel. Manuel, is that you?
Yes, good morning. This is Manuel in Puerto Rico. Jacob.
Hi, Manuel.
How are you? Hey,
Hi, buddy. Manuel, it looks like you are standing. You have a lot of background.
So maybe what I'll do is ask for the folks who are not ready to ask a question. Could you just mute your line? Because we have unmuted you, so if you're not asking a question, please mute your line. And Manuel.
Do you hear me?
Yes, Manuel.
We have a lot of noise in the line, but I have two questions. Would it be possible to have a registration from the European equivalent of the US EPA and or the US EPA to be valid in different countries in Africa? Or if a country has already registered a chemical in their system, could a neighboring country accept the registration from a neighboring country? And the other one is the easiest way to eliminate resistance or to reduce the possibility of resistance is through the elimination of the larval source of mosquitoes. I mean, larval source management, we use anything else except for actual insecticides. And it would be very productive to implement the larval source management in a malaria control program. And we've discussed this at the Vector Control Working Group at length. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people that are not convinced that larval source management is the way to go. But Jacob and I, you know where I stand on that. I think reducing the sources of mosquitoes by either doing LSM and or larviciding with biologicals and hormones and whatnot that are currently available for mosquito control would be very helpful in reducing and minimizing any kind of insecticide resistance on the adult populations.
Right. Amanda, you're right. I think that with the country sub-regional, what do you call it, harmonized registration, that's the whole idea. I remember that about 2 years ago, myself, WHO, and a couple others, CAMA, we submitted a proposal to but we are glad to see that, under the new I2I, that sort of thing is being thought through. I don't know how far they will take it, but we are watching. The whole idea is that if you have the sub-regional market groupings, you're able to have a unified registration procedure that they all buy into. So once a transparent evaluation is done and all the test evaluations are done and it receives the approval for registration, then automatically they all register. In fact, such a thing actually exists in the Francophone countries, is it Mali, Senegal, Gambia, and the others. It already exists something similar. When I was working with them on the IBM thing, if you get one insecticide through, all the countries that buy into that actually then adopt it. So that is the thing we should push, and we have to make strong advocacy for that. It will also help the country, and we have to work with the NMCPs to also be, our in-country advocates for that. As regards to larviciding, certainly you are on point. I don't need to add anything. You're on point. We have to go back to malaria vector control, where all available options are on the table to preclude anything because of conceptual positions, not reliant on local conditions. It's not a way.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Martins Enemo. I'm calling from Shell Petroleum Development Company in Nigeria, Port Harcourt.
Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, quite an interesting discussion we're having. just to have some more light on the issue of the biting time of the Anopheles mosquito. There was a research that was conducted from London School of Hygiene. They came down to Nigeria some years back, and they went to our residential area for Shell and conducted a research, and it was discovered and deduced that the biting time of Anopheles mosquito it's in the night, anytime from maybe 4 p.m. upwards. Yeah, one begin to think aloud to say sometimes these insects, when mosquito is in the house already, and it's not possible for them to also bite in the daytime when someone is exposed. Do they have maybe a wristwatch to wait for time and to bite?
You're correct. You see,
Yeah.
most of the groups like the Anopheles and the others, they are a group of sibling species, or group of, let's say in human terms, relatives, right? And they have different characteristics, that some of them are able to bite earlier. They are able to as early as 5:30, 6:30, depending on where you are, whether the sun goes down around 6 o'clock. They are able to bite. They are able to bite around the house doors when you are sitting outside. They're able to bite. And some of them also, studies have shown, have what we call postprandial exophilia. They can bite and sort of avoid landing on the wall and come back out. So we've seen that sometimes what happens is that as you target effectively those among the sibling species that are predominantly inward resting and inward biting, what is left are those ones that are opportunistic. And so at the beginning, it gives the impression that there is a learning behavior. I remember that when I was doing my master's, I told one of my professors, I think mosquitoes, they learn. And we had a big argument whether they learn or whether, but we know that what happens is that you crop off those that are effectively targeted indoors. And those among the population that have that kind of opportunistic behavior tend to then take hold and therefore you can see a shift to early biting or dawn biting, or outdoor biting. So they are all there, and so classically that is why we also now recognize that we have to look at the whole cycle of the mosquito to see where the other options exist. And that's why the last comment by Manuel is very relevant, that we can also go after the mosquito when they are still pupa and larvae in the water. We can also go after the mosquito when they come out of the water and they group together with the males in order to fertilize their eggs. So if we know the ecology, then we can go in there. Most often now, it is entirely relevant in most of the cases, even in West Africa and East Africa, that you need to add something else other than the indoor residual spraying and the long-lasting net if we are to go towards elimination.
Okay. All right. Again, to follow up my question, this Martin speaking again. The dosage of the instead alpha cypermethrin, that's the one produced by Opus. Yeah, I don't know whether you can help me with the dosage. I'm a little concerned about the dosage because, yeah.
Okay, if I'll get your contacts from Sancia, and I'll provide you, and then we can have time to discuss. I'll provide you information.
Okay.
On that. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Martins, and sure, we will be sure to connect folks on the phone with Jacob if you don't have his contact details. Just a reminder, please, if you're not asking a question, I ask you to put yourself on mute so that we can minimize background noise. Jacob, we have a couple questions coming in through the text system, and so we have a question here from Ole. Government at IIC. Ole wanted to check in with a question. Ole, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you very clearly.
Okay, I had a comment to the presentation. The last slide, but Jacob had 4 lines. The first one was on improved cost efficiency of intervention, and line 4 was increased benefit pesticide manufacturing industry. How do you see to balance these two? Because there's a contradiction. Reduced cost on one side. So if you go improved benefit, that means it's more expensive. So how do you balance line 1 to line 3 in your strategy?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Actually, it may seem that, but really it's not. You see, the financial benefit for the insecticide manufacturers is due to a reliable forecasting, improved prospect for procurement.
On the conference call.
What?
Sorry. Hello. Okay. So what we are saying is that for countries that are able then to forecast better, they are able then to send out their procurement requests ahead of time, and manufacturers don't have to have additional costs, ramping up costs and shipping, expedited shipping just because the insecticide need to get there before the rain starts and all that. So there are all those hidden costs that can go away. And also the fact is that if then countries are better able to clearly identify which insecticide they have to use because of prevailing local situations, then there's more procurement, and therefore the investment overall is recouped better. So in that's the context. Now, in terms of the countries themselves, they being able to identify that, oh, this insecticide that I'm spraying on the wall has become less effective, and maybe it's time, and then you have the ability to decide what else to do to make the overall country program more cost effective. So it's that levels that we are looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks, Jacob, and Ole, thanks for that observation. It's a very good one. I want to turn it over to Adam Flynn at Sumitomo. Adam, you had a question, and then Samuel, you will be up next with your question.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Adam?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Adam from Sumitomo Chemical. Jacob, thank you for the presentation. And I think from the manufacturer's side, we would, totally concur with a lot of the concepts that you've highlighted in the presentation. One of the bottlenecks that we find as an innovator, we brought a lot of products through the HOOPIS system, and we actually have one product at the moment which is a new mode of action insecticide. You mentioned that there hadn't been a new insecticide for 35 years within the vector control field. Well, we have a new mode of action insecticide that we hope will come to market for IRS applications next year.
Wow, nice.
But the one bottleneck that we find over and over again is that when we have new product either be an insecticide or a second generation or a third generation LLAN, is that the donor market doesn't seem to be prepared to pay a premium or even a small premium for that next generation product.
Right.
You know, they say, well, that's great, let's prove the concept, and we totally concur with that, let's prove the added value, but even at that point, and I understand it, but because this is, you know, this is taxpayers' money, because these are donors, getting that return on investment, recouping that R&D cost is virtually impossible. It's so hard, and I think that's where the discussion needs to take place, because
right.
bridging that gap, it just hasn't really happened yet, and unfortunately, you know, there have been good products that you know have sit and perhaps will sit in the future on the shelves gathering dust. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that issue, and it is a big issue.
Yes, it is. In fact, I think that, you know, recalling some of the strategies we have used from Stockholm Convention and others, is that sometimes you need not lobbying the country to buy my product against your product, no, but lobbying the program to come into joint evaluations with us to gather information. It's very important. Why am I saying that? There was a country I don't want to mention now. In the last 5 years, there has been, from the time I was working there for the last, for about 5 years, successive 5 years, we helped them to reduce their transmission and annual burden drastically. And then one of the projects that I was heading then came to an end. Others came in. But since then, they've had over 700% increase, right? They're using an insecticide that is showing up 41% and all that. And then they tried out one with a PBO that brought it up back to 100%. But like you're saying, some funders are still reluctant. Now, what I've been discussing with them is that we can go to a couple of those manufacturers that are producing this and say, look, we need to gather information to convince other people. Can we do a year's evaluation where we apply this in one setting and, you know, do a design where we can compare the incidence of malaria, and even if it is, you know, one case averted per household, you will then be able to cost the actual, you know, the overall cost of treating that case in the health system. And then you can then compare that with the savings made. Then you'll be able to show. But if it is just a basic raw, what do you call it, comparison, then all the funders have to go on is the cost, right? And so for them it makes sense to say, look, if there is no real reason why we should change, tell me a reason why I should go $1 higher.
Yeah,
now,
and
yes.
actually, Jacob, I think you've stumbled on something there, and it's something which I've noticed as well over the years, is that, you know, donors, they don't always take into account that cost for the health system.
Right.
You know, they actually see the cost of the intervention, and
right.
If you look on the Global Fund website, for instance, you'll get a headline of, you know, the amount of ARVs purchased, the amount of LLANs purchased, the amount of dots for TB purchased, which is great, but these are just pure numbers of interventions purchased. They never take into account the compound benefit, the compound monetary benefit to the health system. So then you have an organization which is running on objectives for the numbers of interventions purchased and the savings, which is fine and understood, but it's a very two-dimensional picture that they work to. It's not the three-dimension that we need.
Right, and you know, I mean, you can't blame them. I remember, again, I don't want to mention that when we started a big spray and other programs, the head of the whole program were talking. I said, Jacob, you were in WHO telling us IRS work. Just spray and let us know how much so we can tell our congressmen and women, right? And then it took a while for us to convince them that you also need to check on the vector and see what is happening, and gradually, and now I'm glad to say it is a major component of that program. So there is also a learning cycle. I think what we have to do as manufacturers and private sector is to be very strategic and see what other data sets we need in order to tell our story better, because it is not only dealing with the recommendation at the global level. Following that will be convincing the funder. Following that will be convincing country programs. So if we also strategically think of the extra evaluation that will bring in these other information pieces that help us tell a more rounded story, I think it will be a better use of time and resources. You know, so those are some of the things that I hope our conversations will go on, how we can be very strategic in looking at the multifaceted advocacy agenda and how to respond to that in a more transparent way.
Yeah, thanks.
So can I ask a question to Sumitomo?
Yes.
As I understand it, then you consider the risk and the cost are too high. So in some way you want, I've seen under the slides presentation, will come from the private sector, you want some guarantee for the market. You know, this is not normal on a open commercial market to demand for a guarantee of the market. You cannot do that on agricultural pesticide. But if we say we should make a special case out of the health sector because it's smaller, then what is your trade-off? It could be like in the medical sector where I have said for HIV medicine that they go for a reduced profit on the condition that they have a more known market. Could you accept something like that?
Sorry, Ola, I didn't get your last sentence.
What you were saying was something similar to the, let's say, the NTD program, where there is a reduced cost, you know, a reduced profit margin in order to guarantee a broader market. I think that part of the I2I strategy is to work towards guaranteeing some market. I remember, if you all remember, the early days of the ACTs and also the LLIs when it was coming in, there was a genuine effort at the global level to guarantee some markets, and even went to pre-qualification just to make sure that, you know, the market responds.
That was not my point. My point was to say that if this is a general system, then there must be, the two sides must have an interest to meet. So the donors organization must then say, okay, we will guarantee you this and this, but then you must accept a reduced profit. And then my question to Sumitomo, would you accept such a model?
Yes, we would. Yes, we would, and in fact, that has been, you know, discussed off the record with relevant parties. But even then, you know, the recent feedback that we've had is that unless pricing is the same as a previous generation product line, then really nothing goes forward. So, you know, we've had the R&D and you know, the whole research and development cost, the setup cost, the launch cost, the approvals cost, etc. And then, you know, there's just, in a commercial market, you would expect then to have a slight premium above a previous generation product line. But yeah, it just hasn't happened. There's an impasse and it just stalls at this point. But yes, we would be prepared. We do fully realize, obviously, we've been in this market for a long time, that this is donor money, that this is taxpayer money. But unless a deal can be cut at some, you know, at some point, and when we would consider that. But I think it plays again towards these data sets that Jacob highlighted earlier, and really seeing where the value is, and if they can see value to the health system of these next generation products, then perhaps a deal is there to be done. But until that point, you know, the amount of trial, the amount of trial data, we've got, you know, tons of it. It doesn't seem to tip the balance. So there is a sticking point there. There's an impasse there, and maybe it is that data set, or it may well just be that you know, the donors, you know, they only have a certain amount of money and they're only going for coverage. But the thing is, with insecticide resistance, and we all know this, if you have a coverage-only strategy, resistance will get worse.
Sure.
And I think, you know, that's a big issue with many donors, and I understand that that's their standpoint, because, you know, they are financiers and they're looking for numbers of interventions. But as we all know, in vector control and in pharmaceuticals, coverage will mean resistance.
Thank you, Adam. This is a really, really rich discussion that we're having right here, and it's some ideas generating. So we'll get to that. But I am conscious of time. We're at 11:04. And if folks are willing to go for maybe another 10 minutes, it would be great if we could get to a couple of questions. There's another question from Peter Anga from Shell. Samuel Asedu, he had a question as well. And I also wanted to just call on Egon at BASF as another manufacturer to get your perspective. So maybe if we go through those three, and then wrap up, I think that would be good if folks aren't opposed. So Peter, do you mind posing your question? I'm happy to read it. It's what type of mutations to these insecticides are we seeing in the vectors?
Right. You know, the insecticides we have actually affect the nervous system, right? And so there are certain mutations that, you know, impacts the ability for the insect to accommodate the level of concentration that has been proposed for the intervention. Others also, we see the uptake of particular enzymes that help to break down the insecticides. So we see increase in enzymes, and then we see actual point mutation on the, like a sodium shunt mutation that then interferes with the action of the insecticides. But then you know that these react, you know, often in the past what we've done is that, oh, I see a KDR, so there is this. But with increased understanding, we've seen that it's an interaction of all these mechanisms, and then it expresses itself phenotypically as the level of resistance that the insect has. So now it's more being advocated that you do a full panel of the known mechanisms, and there are protocols for it, so that you have a better understanding of what is happening if you track it. Yeah,
Thank you, Jacob. Peter, I hope that spoke to your question. So Samuel, I'm going to call on you right now with your question. Samuel, do you want to go ahead?
Have we lost them?
Thank you, Jacob, for your presentation. That was brilliant. My name is Samuel Esiedu, and I'm with Episcopal Relief and Development. My question is, in view of the lengthy period for getting certification for the use of new insecticides, to what extent would you rate the threat of insecticide resistance to current effort in malaria control? And the follow-up question would be, and will this threat change the current recommended method for malaria control in the next 3 to 5 years? That's using LLINs and IRS.
Well, a number of issues. Our expectation, hopefully, is that whatever new procedure that is put in place will at least be two years or under to get things, through the evaluation system. That would be ideal, and to our mind, that will be the most efficient way of, because you also need time to evaluate it and all that, knowing all the public health issues. So that is our expectation. Now, in terms of IRS, the insecticide resistance, once it establishes, is a bit more profound. With LLINs, you still have the barrier. We're still understanding how insecticide resistance actually may affect utility of the tool. So far, we have not demonstrated any point at which the tool has failed. Okay, but what we also understand is that the whole concept of using an insecticide is to knock off the insect before it becomes infective. So conceptually, any development that seeks to undermine that aspect will need to be strategically looked at. So in terms of LLINs, it's not as profound, but it is a process that is developing, and we don't know how things turn up, and we cannot afford to put our hands at the back and hope for the best. We have to proactively work towards it. So you see that industry is working towards bringing a solution where that second concept of the insecticide knockdown or killing the mosquito is ramped back up. So that is the conceptual approach. Now, what we need to do in that sense, I would say that for IRS, as you know, in many places, you can't spray anymore, or your options are very restricted. And the restrictions put you into classes of insecticides that traditionally have shorter residual efficacy. And therefore, if you have very prolonged transmission, then you are looking at repeated cycles of IRS, which itself can be onerous. So it is a problem. I think it's multifaceted, and we all have to have cool heads and look at the options, and not to preclude anything because conceptually now it's either too expensive or whatever. I mean, let's look at all the options and choose what is best going forward to what country,
Thank you, Jacob. So very quickly, I want to give Egon an opportunity to make comments if he had any, and also the team at Chevron. Nesto, I know you're on. if you have any comments, and then we will wrap things up.
Thank you, Sancia. And thank you, Jacob, for the very good presentation. I have just came to my mind, I mean, when I think about the chlorphenapyr story, I actually pushed this already into the lupus process in 2010, having in mind actually the Mekong dilemma, which at that time we already knew that there is ACT resistance, and this resistance area should be contained. At that time it was rather small. And we already had the risk assessment and everything ready for chlorphenapyr. It is actually also used in food crops. So there is no risk really. And the intention had been, why can't we use this product as an emergency permit type issue and spray the forests to really get rid of those mosquitoes which actually transfer the artemisian resistance. So this never came to this point. Now we have 2016 and we still don't have a recommendation for chlorphenapyr, mainly because of the inadequate work and the quality work of academia. Now think about it. We have, with the resistance, the emergency is actually probably 10 or 100 folds larger than what we talk with Zika at the moment. Because resistance, as you correctly said, will never go away anymore. And it can destroy all our efforts over the last 20 years, which went into malaria. So my question is, why don't we think as a consolidated group about some type of emergency registrations which actually would enable a product to actually deal with the big problem without having thousands approvals, which takes years, but actually to get a quick emergency approval, maybe if it's only for a year, during that year you can evaluate more things, but actually then you really start tackling the problem. Otherwise, we will be hanging around another couple of years, and it will be the same with any other new product until we finally go through hundreds of approvals.
Right.
So I think, where is the way that we can push to take a bit more risk? I mean, we are not risking anything with people or lives because products are safe, right? But what we really risk is to get resistance growing even 10 times bigger.
Yes, Egon, just a short comment that what you've said, you know, is right on point. And I remember the last 8 months of my stay in the there was a new program that DG brought out that talks about intellectual property, and the focus really was on medicines, right? And I remember that the formulation we were coming up with, global patenting with the lawyers and all that, was to enable emergency opportunity for emergency use of even in medicines under what do you call it, which are not generic yet, right? So for a limited number, the country can declare emergency and use it for a limited number of time. I think what was easier then was that the market had one voice. To be frank with you, our market on the vector control side, sometimes we speak with different voices and sometimes we speak against each other. Also maybe because the market is small and all that. But like you're rightly saying, chlorphenapyr is already being used in agriculture at even a slightly higher concentration. And with a minimal concentration used for public health purposes, that shouldn't pose a problem. And we should begin to, and that's one of the things that I hope, you know, we can ramp up, to try and find unified voices that bridge our differences so that we can stand as a unified group, because that's the only way you can make good advocacy. And we do have a point. I mean, the situation as it's coming up for resistance in terms of nearly invalidating the primary tool like IRS in many areas, it's a matter of concern, and to pretend as if it's not, you know, it's not helpful. There is Sancia.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you very much. And so this is such a great conversation, and in many ways we could continue discussing for the next couple of hours, but I just want to be conscious of people's time. We appreciate the time that you took out to join this discussion. Paulina, we saw your message, and we will send a note to Jacob so that he could respond to that and connect you to as well. You know, hearing this conversation, there are a couple of things that it's evident that we could take forward. I think the first piece is across the various private sector groupings that we all are a part of. It's important, I think, for us first to state clearly our position. What are the areas that we believe as a group we need to focus on, and that other stakeholders, you know, we're calling to other stakeholders to partner with us to focus on these issues. So we have a draft advocacy statement or document that we have prepared that basically formed the foundation of this presentation. We will share it with you all coming out of this call for your reaction. We ask that you keep it within this group, because whether you know it or not, you all have sort of officially been sort of appointed as or core, you know, sort of or broader advocacy group on this topic. And we would love for your input. Some of you have already shared with us your comments, and we'll continue to work with you to refine that. And then what we can do is we will request of you to get your feedback on concretely what do you think we can do. So I hear examples such as it's important for us to have a discussion with donors, particularly around the issue of, you know, profit guarantee or market guarantee and procurement. So maybe we do need to take that discussion to the next level and have that as a joint private sector donor discussion, closed door. That's just an idea. We've done something similar in the past as GBCHealth around the BedNet dialogue. I'm also hearing, you know, that we do need to perhaps just identify one or two countries, pick a country, and see how we could work with that country to test some of these potential areas, looking at regional registration mechanisms, for example. So we ask that you share with us your concrete ideas around what you think we can do, and how you, as a part of your company and your company itself, would be willing to work with us to make these things happen. So those would be my closing words. Nesto, I know you're online. Is there anything else you would like to say? Oh, he can't unmute. Sorry about that, Nesto. We'll look into that so that you make sure that you can unmute the next time. And Chevron extends their thanks to everyone for joining today's discussion as well, and we here at GBC thank Chevron for getting us to this point as well. So with that, thank you so much for taking the time, for giving us your comments on the call, for engaging in such a good discussion. Jacob, thank you for leading us. We'll be following up with the presentation with this draft statement document for your further feedback. and we will request your ideas. So please continue to share your comments with us, and we will connect everyone over email so we can continue the dialogue in the short term. With that, I want to wish everyone a good rest of day wherever you are, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.